Welcome to another episode of History Done Right. My name is Timothy Barrett, and I host these episodes. Come out somewhat on a weekly basis, although I'm going to apologize. We have had a lot of smoke here in this area, and it's really affecting my voice. I don't know if you can tell, or probably can't, but so I apologize if I cough or my voice doesn't sound right, but we will power on through given the conditions. Anyway, this is History Done Right, a series that has gone on for this. I think this is episode 28, and we are working our way through early universal history, particularly that history as the Bible records. If you want to know more about the philosophy of what it is, the approach that we're taking here, go to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel, click on playlists, find History Done Right, listen to the first 2 or 3 episodes, and you'll get a good idea of our philosophy and our embracing of a providential view of history. And the reason we call this History Done Right is that we want to understand history rightly, and that is as created by God, God's hand guiding and directing the events of history, whether we understand them, why events happen the way that they do, doesn't matter. We humble ourselves under God's governing and guiding and sustaining hand. We acknowledge that history begins with God's creative act, and that history for mankind begins with Adam, who was given a helper, Eve, and that from them descend all people who have ever lived. More particularly, we hold to the flood that wiped everything out, wiped out all humanity except for those God chose to save in the ark, and that's Noah and his sons. And that's where we're at in our series. We're at that point where the Bible records for us the descendants of Noah's sons, and that's in Genesis chapter 10. And so that's where we're going to be tonight to start with. And we'll review a little bit about what we looked at in the last episode from Genesis chapter 10. Now, let me just say, Genesis chapter 10 is sometimes called the Table of Nations, since it takes each of Noah's 3 sons one at a time and talks about descendants of those sons and to some extent descendants of the sons of those sons. And I would encourage you with your children to sit down and try to build some kind of a chart the way that you see it, or particularly the way that your children see it. Right? You can get them started. You could perhaps put Noah at the top of the page or to the left-hand side of a page, and then list Shem, Ham, and Japheth if you're doing it on the side of the page, or Shem, Ham, Japheth, and then have them read through chapter 10 and start building that chart, however makes sense to them. Okay, so let me just show you one way that it could be done. Let's see. We're clicking around here and trying to share. There we go. All right, so here you can see one way that this could be done. All right, you can start with Noah, list Noah's 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and then have your children build out the list of what Genesis 10 says. Those who descend from Shem, those who descend from Ham, those who descend from Japheth. And now you could go even further than what this says. For example, in Genesis 10, verse 2, it tells us that Gomer is a son of Japheth. But then in verse 3, it says, and the sons of Gomer, right? So we could add another section here, and we could put the sons of Gomer here. It tells us who the sons of Javan are in verse 4 of chapter 10 of Genesis, and so we could list those here. And okay, so let's say that we do that. What could we then what could we do to help us even further, perhaps? Well, let me show you this. So we will, let's see, we need to do that. We need to do this. I didn't know I was going to do all this, so I'm playing with the technology here. Okay, so let me bring up my digital Bible. And here, pull that down. Okay, so here we see that the sons of Japheth, Gomer, right? And so Gomer is a son of Japheth. And then verse 3, it tells us that, and the sons of Gomer, and the first one listed there is Ashkenaz. Okay, well, who's that? Well, over here in this window right here, I have Smith's Bible Dictionary. So this is just one example. I'm not saying this is the one you have to use, but here's an example. You go to Smith's Bible Dictionary, Ashkenaz, one of the three sons of Gomer, son of Japheth. We may probably recognize the tribe of Ashkenaz on the northern shore of Asia Minor in the name of Lake Ascanius, and in Europe in the name Scandinavia. Noble considers that Ashkenaz is to be identified with the German race. Okay, so, all right, that's interesting. So at this point, imagine the chart you're building, whether horizontally or vertically, right? When Ashkenaz is listed, going to Smith's Bible Dictionary or another Bible dictionary, find out what it says there. And here, with next to Ashkenaz, you could write the German race or just the Germans. And now you're starting to build this table of nations, and you're taking what you're finding in Genesis 10, and you're finding, oh yeah, we know the Germans, we know Germany, right? And we can start identifying more particularly. So let's take this next one, Riphath, and let's see if Smith has, there we go, Riphath, the second son of Gomer. The name may be identified with the Riphaean Mountains, that is, the Carpathian range in the northeast of Dacia. Okay, well, where's that? Well, now we've got some geography work to do. We may not be able to find this name. I'm pretty sure you can find that name. Maybe you can even find that place. And now with this person, there's a people group, an ethnicity, a nation, country that you can attach to that person. And now this table of nations becomes much more interesting, right? Genesis 10 begins to take on more meaning because the sons and grandsons listed there actually become the fathers, if you will, of nations that we might be familiar with or might not. I mean, some of these may just have disappeared from history. Now, the other thing that I would point out is that a few times in chapter 10, you will read something like verse 5 here, where it says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, that is his language, after their families, that is their heritage or their culture, you could say, in their nations, right? Sorry, let's back up. Divided in their lands, that's their geography, that's their borders, okay? Everyone after his tongue, that's their language. After their families, that's their heritage or culture, and that becomes their nation. So it would seem to be that there are three, biblically speaking, there are three characteristics that make up a nation. It's a common geography or common borders, a common language, and a common culture, a common heritage, right? Because that's what family is about, right? One of the things that family does for us is it builds traditions that we carry forward in our life. It becomes the culture in which we live. And so there are families today, new families, young married couple with young children who are building into their family traditions that they are bringing from their families as they marry, right? And they're continuing a culture that has um, been previously given to them. Okay, so that's a little exercise that can be part of a lesson. Okay, so last episode, we made it through verse 20 in chapter 10, and so let us go back to Matthew Henry's commentary, and we're going to move on to verse 21 here. Make it a little, that's too big, maybe. All right. So at verse 21, unto Shem also. Now we've gone through um, Japheth's children. Those were the first, and Matthew Henry suggested that the reason those were given first is because those are the least consequential at the time of Moses, right? They are at the greatest distance from the direct audience to whom Moses is writing. They are people groups that um, the people of Moses would have the least contact with, maybe. Then it went through the sons of Ham, and it went through those next because, well, these are effectively turn out to be the enemies of the children of Israel. Okay. And then he finishes with those that are of greatest importance to the direct audience to whom Moses is writing, and that's Shem. Okay. So unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber. Okay. So Eber, going to my line here. Eber is not a son of Shem. According to my wall chart, Arphaxad is the immediate son of Shem, who has a son, Salah, who is the immediate father of Eber. Now, Eber is interesting. Why? Because Eber is perhaps the one from whom we get the name Hebrew. Let's see if so. I mean, that's possible. We'll see if um, Matthew Henry notes anything about that. But as it's here, the important thing to note here is that Eber is not a direct son of Shem. He would be a son, grandson, great grandson of Shem. Okay, so unto Shem also, the father of all the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth, the elder. Okay, so meaning that Shem is the brother of Japheth. Japheth the firstborn, Shem the secondborn. The children of Shem, Elam and Asher and Arphaxad, and Lud and Aram. Okay, so it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 named. Now, I don't know that means he had only 6. Those were the 6 that were named. Maybe he only had 6. I don't know. He had at least 6 sons, right? Presumably there were some daughters along the way. Right? Okay, and the children of Aram, the last one listed, I guess the youngest, Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash. And Arphaxad, now Arphaxad is presumably the firstborn, and Arphaxad begat Salah, and Salah begat Eber. So here we get to Eber, right? Remember, Eber is apparently important because Moses thought to write that Shem, the father of all the children of Eber. So Eber is apparently important. And here we see that Eber is the direct son of Salah. And unto Eber were born 2 sons. The name of one was Peleg, for in his days was the earth divided, and his brother's name was Joktan. So this Peleg, in his days was the earth divided. We'll see what Matthew Henry says, but don't take that to mean the time of the flood. All of this is post-flood people. Okay. So think about what kind of division is being talked about there. His brother's name was Joktan, and Joktan begat Almadad and Shelef and Hazar and Moveth and Jerah and Mesalizah, Hadaram and Usal and Dikla and Obal and Adonal. By the time you're done, all these were the sons of Joktan. I think there's 13 listed there. So he was being fruitful and multiplying. Good for him. And their dwelling was from Mesha, as thou goest unto Sephar, a mount of the east. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, and after their nations. There's that phraseology again, right? What does it say here? Now it's a different order, but same 3 criteria. After their families, think culture. After their tongues, think language. In their lands, think borders. After their nations, right? It would seem to be that those are, again, 1, 2, 3 characteristics of a nation. These are the families of the sons of Noah after their generations in their nations, and by these were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. Now, this doesn't claim to be a complete list, okay? Perhaps elsewhere in the Bible we'll figure out or find some other information about children and such, and but this is the list that Moses is directed by divine inspiration to provide at this point. And the other thing that we want to keep in mind here is that Genesis 10 is not chronologically before Genesis 11. Okay? Genesis 10 is not, it's not telling us a historical event that happens between Genesis 9 and Genesis 11. It's giving us information about, here's how nations, current nations, the nations, let's say at the time that Moses is writing, how they descended from the sons of Noah. Okay, let's see how Matthew Henry handles this. 2 things especially are observable in this account of the posterity of Shem. The description of Shem. We have not only his name, Shem, which signifies a name, but 2 titles to distinguish him by. First, He was the father of all the children of Eber. We read that. Eber was his great grandson, but why should he be called the father of all his children rather than of all Arphaxids or Salahs? Probably because Abraham and his seed, God's covenant people, not only descended from Eber or Hebrew, but from him were called Hebrews. Okay, so there it is right there. This is why Eber is significant. Okay, oh, you're the sons of Eber, you're Hebrews. Okay, I don't know. However, it happened, but that's um, that's where we get the term Hebrew, presumably. Paul looked upon it as a privilege, as his privilege, that he was a Hebrew of the Hebrews, Philippians 3:5. Eber himself, we may suppose, was a man eminent for religion in a time of general apostasy and a great example of piety to his family. And the Holy Tongue being commonly called from him the Hebrew, it is probable that he retained it in his family in the confusion of Babel as a special token of God's favor to him. And from him, the professors of religion were called the children of Eber, or the Hebrews. Now, it seems that Matthew Henry is even suggesting here that the Hebrew language is going to be preserved through Eber. Now, you'll remember we read about Peleg, and that in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. Okay, and that's going to have something to do with the confusion of Babel. Okay, now when the inspired penman, that's Moses, would give Shem an honorable title, he calls him the father of the Hebrews. Okay, now Matthew Henry, he doesn't, in the biblical text, it doesn't say that specifically. What Matthew Henry is saying is that to call Shem the father of all the children of Eber is to call Shem the father of the Hebrews. Though when Moses wrote this, they were a poor, despised people, bondslaves in Egypt, yet being God's people, it was an honor to a man to be akin to them. As Ham, though he had many sons, is disowned by being called the father of Canaan, on whose seed the curse was entailed, so Shem, though he had many sons, is dignified with the title of the father of Eber, on whose seed the blessing was entailed. Note, a family of saints is more truly honorable than a family of nobles. Shem's holy seed than Ham's royal seed, Jacob's 12 patriarchs than Ishmael's 12 princes. Goodness is true greatness. Okay, so once again, Matthew Henry, in a masterful way, distills the history here down to a teachable moment, a learnable lesson, I guess I'm done there. But I mean, that's why does he say Shem's holy seed than Ham's royal seed? Because he just told us that um, Ham was disowned by being called the father of Canaan, on whose seed the curse was entailed. Well, if you remember from earlier in Genesis 10, what did we learn? Well, Ham had a son, Mizraim, the father of the Egyptians. And Matthew Henry just said that when Moses wrote this, the children of Eber were a poor, despised people, bond slaves in Egypt. Well, who are the royal people? Well, the royal people would be those who were the slave owners, the Egyptians, right? And so that's what Matthew Henry is referring to here. And then later in history, we'll get to this, Jacob's 12 patriarchs compared with Ishmael's 12 princes. But distilling all that down, there's a lesson. Goodness is true greatness. And now this right here, this is a wonderful example of what it is that we need to be doing. If we want to do history right, one of the things that we need to be doing is distilling the lessons of history down to bite-sized chunks like this. And Imagine with your children at bedtime, right? What's that lesson we learned? Goodness is true greatness. And then asking the question, were you good today? Um, and that's the lesson applied. So that's powerful. That's powerful. And that's, this is one of the things that makes Matthew Henry a great resource. Certainly it's not the only resource for doing history right, but it's a great resource because so often he distills the lesson of history that you're reading about into a meaningful proverb, a meaningful phrase, saying that is readily applicable. Okay, so the one title of Shem is father of all the children of Eber. The second title here is the brother of Japheth, the elder. By which it appears that, though Shem is commonly put first, he was not Noah's firstborn, but Japheth was older. But why should this also be put as part of Shem's title and description, that he was the brother of Japheth, since it had been, in effect, said often before? And was he not as much brother to Ham? Probably this was intended to signify the union of the Gentiles with the Jews in the church. The sacred historian had mentioned it as Shem's honor that he was the father of the Hebrews, but lest Japheth's seed should therefore be looked upon as forever shut out from the church, he here reminds us that he was the brother of Japheth, not in birth only, but in blessing. For Japheth was to dwell in the tents of Shem. Note, those are brethren in the best manner that are so by grace, and that meet in the covenant of God and in the communion of saints. And second, God, in dispensing his grace, does not go by seniority, but the younger sometimes gets the start of the elder in coming into the church. So the last shall be first, and the first last. So this motif of the younger, let's say having preference before the elder, it's a common motif that runs through Scripture. And it's a common motif in families through Scripture, because it's the typology of the second Adam has preference over the first Adam, right? The second is the blessed man of the Psalms. The first is the fool of the Psalms. The second man doesn't sit in the council of the wicked. The first Adam does. And so this motif, it just repeats through Scripture where, everything by law says the eldest son or the firstborn son is preferred, gets a double portion, and gets the first of the inheritance. And yet God's plan in history is not accomplished strictly by the law. God's plan through history flows from his long suffering, from his grace. And his grace rescues us from the faults and flaws of the firstborn and saves us by the blessing of the younger. So rescues us from the flaws and faults and the sin of Adam, and rescues us by his grace put on display through Jesus Christ. Okay, now Roman numeral 2 here, Matthew Henry's going to take up Peleg. The reason of the name of Peleg, because in his days, that is, about the time of his birth when his name was given him, was the earth divided among the children of men that were to inhabit it. either when Noah divided it by an orderly distribution of it, as Joshua divided the land of Canaan by lot, or when, upon their refusal to comply with that division, God in justice divided them by the confusion of tongues. Whichsoever of these was the occasion, pious Eber saw cause to perpetuate the remembrance of it in the name of his Son, and justly may our sons be called by the same name, for in our days, in another sense, is the earth, the church, most wretchedly divided. All right, so what is Matthew Henry getting at here? Well, he's talking about two options or possibilities of what it means there. Perhaps the first, Noah saying to his sons, you go that way, you go that way, you go that way, however he did that, possibly. Or at the confusion as a consequence of man's defiance of God's mandate that he be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Well, that's not going to happen if you decide to just live in one central location, and it's going to be problematic that as a people you're going to be wholly committed to the worship of the one true God when apparently you're building that central tower that will be the economic center, the religious center, and all, and it's going to be all in honor of, well, I mean, frankly, it's Tower of Babel is perhaps the more extravagant golden calf, you might say, right? It essentially becomes the idol, or at least housing the idol in the sense of man's religion that will be worshipped. And so maybe that's when Peleg is named. Now, according to my wall chart, it's going to suggest that Peleg is named because of the Tower of Babel. It appears to me the way that he's got Peleg. Well, yeah, I'll say yeah. On my wall chart, it appears to be that way. Matthew Henry again allows for two possibilities there again. One could be Noah dividing the earth by an orderly distribution of it. The other being the confusion of tongues. It seems to me that the way the earth gets divided and we get the various people groups or nations spread out over the earth is clearly from the incident at Tower of Babel, not by the orderly distribution of Noah. In fact, I mean, based on what we can see in the history, you'd have to say that Noah's orderly distribution of things did not work out well, if there was one, because everybody seems to, based on what we read, I think this will be the next story we get to here. Everybody seems to gather at the Tower of Babel. And in fact, well, I'm not going to give anything away. We'll read it here as we move on to Genesis chapter 11. Okay, so once again, don't fall into the deception that some people might try to foist upon us, that, oh, well, look, the Bible's all messed up because Genesis 10 can't have happened before Genesis 11, blah, 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 blah. Well, no, it could happen that the sons of Noah would start having their own sons before the Tower of Babel, right? In fact, probably they did have sons before the Tower of Babel. But there's nothing that demands that Genesis 10 be actually even presenting the flow of history necessarily. It's simply giving us a record of, the way many history books do. They give a kind of overview of, in this period of history, you have all these different nations doing whatever, right? And then when you read from there, what do you read? You read about particular nations emerging, right? And it's like, well, before they emerged, were they really a nation? They were just a people group that was kind of living in obscurity, right? So we don't think that, oh, the history book's all messed up because it told us about this nation, and then it was halfway through the chapter that we learned that finally that nation emerged, right? It's a way we do things, right? We always, when we tell stories of what happened in a particular day, we tell about something generally, and then we go back and we start filling in the pieces. Well, the Bible's allowed to do that too, right? Okay, so let's go to Genesis chapter 11. We'll look at the first 4 verses here. Let me big that up a bit. Let's see, Genesis 11. It says here, the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. Why it says it that way, I don't know. I don't know why. I'm not sure I'm not sure that there's any significance in saying it was of one language and of one speech. I mean, does it mean that not only do they speak the same language, but they spoke the same dialect? I don't know. Like, they all had the same accent. I don't know. It's interesting that my one dead theologian here points out that the Jerusalem Targum paraphrases the words, "And all the generations of the earth were of one language and of one speech and of one counsel, for they spoke in the holy tongue in which the world was created at the beginning." Well, that would be the King's English, right? Because the King James Bible. No. Maybe. I don't know. I think a point here is that, remember what I mentioned from Genesis chapter 10, the 3 characteristics of a nation. One of those is a common language. Okay. Now this says the whole earth. What does it mean by the whole earth? Well, I assume it means that if you walked up to every living being at the time that this chapter begins, you'd understand them. They'd be speaking a language with the accent or dialect that you understood. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Now, the they, who are they? Well, the only thing that we're given as the referent of the pronoun they is the whole earth. So you'd have to say all the inhabitants. Everybody's going to this same place, this plain in the land of Shinar, and they're going to dwell there. They're going to live there. Now you can see, if you're doing history right, this is a great point at which you're going to introduce geography, right? You're going to get yourself a an outline map of this region, right? You're going to find the mountains of Ararat on there or whatever. Here's where they ended up roughly, right? Now, where are they going to go? Where's this plain of Shinar, the land of Shinar? Where is that? You're going to do your best using um, Bible atlases and such to find those locations, and your children are going to touch this information by completing their um, outline map. Maybe they're going to, they can sketch a little Noah's Ark. You're there at the mountains of Ararat. They could draw an arrow towards the plain in the land of Shinar, and they could draw little tents, and this is where they're going to dwell. And they, again, the inhabitants of the earth, said to one another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the whole face, or the face of the whole earth." Okay, so let's just sit with those 4 verses for a moment. All the inhabitants speak in the same language, gather in the same location, and come up with the same idea. Let's build a city, but not just a city, right? So, okay, so if they're going to build a city, that's going to suggest permanence, right? Especially if they're going to build their city out of brick and mortar, right? They're not building a tent city that could be easily collapsed and they can move. They're building the kind of structures that are meant for permanence, or suggest permanence. But then it's not just a city, it's a tower. Why do they want a tower? Well, they want to build a tower whose top may reach unto heaven. Okay, so what does that mean? That its top may reach unto heaven? Well, probably it means that they're thinking that's a way to get to where God lives. And so I think it's no stretch at all to recognize this tower as this is going to be their religious center. This is the center of their life. Now, I mean, yeah, you can build a church building, right? The real issue is coming up here. I mean, there's probably already an issue. But what we're reading about the brick for stone and the slime for mortar, building a city, building a tower, those are the symptoms or the consequences of the real issue. Okay. It says here, let us make a name. Okay. Well, that could be a problem. Let us make a name. Maybe what we read here with Matthew Henry will give us some sense of what's the significance of that. But the next thing here is, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Now, here's something that we need to understand, okay? Lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Scattered. Okay, remember, the mandate is to be fruitful and fill the earth. Okay? You don't fill the earth by everybody living in one location. In fact, everybody living in one location right? Everybody confining themselves to a smaller geographic area, to a particular city that has limits as far as how many buildings there are and how many rooms are in those buildings. That's going to put downward pressure on being fruitful and multiplying. Okay. At some point, people are going to look at each other and say, well, we don't have any more room. We can't have more children. We're running out of room. This is a conscious decision through groupthink that somehow these inhabitants are going to be better off not fulfilling God's command to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay, let's see what Matthew Henry can help us understand. And he's talking, we're jumping to the part where he talks about the tower itself. The tower, seems designed for an affront to God himself. For they would build a tower whose top might reach to heaven, which bespeaks a defiance of God, or at least a rivalship with him. You know, the thing that comes to my mind, the way that's written there, it's the idea of I don't like where I am, and I want to be where God is. And sorry, I'm trying to get my Webster's 1828 to work properly. You know, the one being that I think could potentially be really motivated, right, to get from where he's been cast down to where he used to be. I think you know who I'm talking about. And I think that's not a stretch to bring that being into this moment, because I think that we have some pretty reliable histories that start to connect devil worship with what's happening here at the Tower of Babel. We'll see if Matthew Henry addresses that at all, but I think we'll see it because we're getting to a point where we're going to move away from limiting ourselves to the Bible and Matthew Henry's commentary, and start bringing in other histories that we can read and we can glean some pretty interesting information from. But I just want to take a moment. That word affront, you know, it may be a word that you're familiar with or not, but it's maybe not that commonly used. So I just wanted to go to Webster's 1828 and look at the definition here. Affront, it's being used as a noun here. Well, how do you know, Mr. Barrett? It has a noun marker in front of it. It's also the object of the preposition for, so that has to be a noun. Anyway, affront as the noun means opposition to the face, open defiance, ill treatment, abuse, anything reproachful or contemptuous that excites or justifies resentment. Now, the fourth definition, Webster does say in popular language, slight resentment, displeasure, right? So it could be used in a light way with a lighter meaning, but it's a full meaning. Sorry, I don't know if I just made everything go crazy on YouTube. I accidentally clicked on a spot on my desktop where I wasn't meant to. Anyway, in its original, ill treatment, abuse, anything reproachful or contemptuous. I mean, it's a strong word to say that something is an affront. Okay, back to Matthew Henry. They, that is the inhabitants of the earth, would be like the Most High, or would come as near him as they could, not in holiness, but in height. Right? So that's a really interesting phrase that Matthew Henry uses there, because you could say not in substance, but in appearance, right? In show, um, not truly like the Most High, but they're going to try to put on an act that they're like him. They forgot their place, and scorning to creep on the earth, resolved to climb to heaven, not by the door or ladder, but some other way. They hoped hereby to make themselves a name. Let's see what he says here, right? Because I said, well, maybe he'll help us understand what that means, to make a name for ourselves. They would do something to be talked of now, and to give posterity to know that there had been such men as they in the world. All right, so a name, you could say they wanted fame, right? Remember my name. And yeah, we want to be remembered, but we want to be remembered in uh, a truly meaningful way, and that is in a way that um, shows forth God's glory through the life that we've lived. Um, that's not what's happening here. You can imagine as they're stacking those bricks and building that tower, um, the pride that is welling up within them. Look at what we are accomplishing. You know, that God of Noah, he never told us about this. We are accomplishing this thing, and we are going to be remembered for what we did. Um, Matthew Henry goes on, rather than die and leave no memorandum behind them, they would leave this monument of their pride. Well, look at that. Honestly, I didn't look ahead. This monument of their pride and ambition and folly. Why is it folly? Because it's done in defiance of their God. Note, affectation of honor and the name among men commonly inspires with a strange ardor for great and difficult undertakings, and often betrays to that which is evil and offensive to God. Okay? Affectation, that's putting on the appearance of. It's not genuine, it's not real. Put on the appearance of honor and a name so that men will applaud you. Well, Matthew Henry is saying what ends up happening is um, you take on these difficult undertakings, like what? Well, I don't know, maybe building a tower that reaches all the way to heaven. But worse than that, it betrays the person who's sucked into that and maybe consciously walks into that, betrays them to that which is evil and offensive to God. And so the taking on of a great undertaking is not necessarily a problem, but it certainly is a problem if that undertaking is a fast trek to something that is evil and offensive to God, right? And so if this is the circumstance that men, in order to gain honor and the praise of mankind, take on great and difficult undertakings that are really evil and offensive to God. Why evil and offensive to God? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay, let's live in this one geographic location. Let's build this one tower. We'll all gather around this. We'll stay right here. We'll build a city. That's evil and offensive to God. Not building a city and not building a tower, right? What I'm saying is to choose those options that are not in accordance with be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so, what does Matthew Henry conclude here? It is just with God to bury those names in the dust which are raised by sin. These Babel builders put themselves to a great deal of foolish expense to make themselves a name, but they could not gain even this point, for we do not find in any history the names of so much as one of these Babel builders. Philo Judaeus says they engraved every one his name upon a brick as a perpetual memorial. Yet neither did this serve their purpose. Now, I don't know if they did that or not. Maybe they did. I mean, it kind of makes sense if they think that this is how their name is going to be remembered. But it's interesting, Matthew Henry points out, okay, what's their names? Give me their names, right? And this could be a great teachable moment for our children as we're reading this history. Okay, let's name these people who built this tower. Number 3, the inhabitants of the earth, did it to prevent their dispersion. It was done, says Josephus, in disobedience to that command, replenish the earth. This is what I've been talking about, right? God orders them to disperse. No, say they, we will not. We will live and die together. Okay, so here's a lesson. When God says disperse, you know what you do? Yeah. In order hereunto, they engage themselves in one another in this vast undertaking, that they might unite in one glorious empire. They resolved to build this city and tower to be the metropolis of their kingdom and the center of their unity. It is probable that the band of ambitious Nimrod was in all this. He could not content himself with the command of a particular colony, but aimed at universal monarchy, in order to which, under pretense of uniting for their common safety, he contrives to keep them in one body, that having them all under his eye, he might not fail to have them under his power. See the daring presumption of these sinners? Now, I don't think it's unreasonable to apply this to circumstances today, that the lack of wisdom to unite under a universal monarchy, right, to be brought together in one body under one eye, to be under one power. Okay, and we should not be fooled by, oh, there's safety and protection and such, right? We live in a time when there is, and I'm not trying to be apocalyptic or doomsday or even prophetic, all right? I'm simply saying we live in a time when there's a lot of surveillance that goes on. You might try to count the number of cameras that capture you, just, public cameras that capture you, at least that you can see, just on your way to the grocery store, while you're in the grocery store, and on your way back home. I'm just saying that that's all part of a system that, to some extent, is rooted in the daring presumption of sinners. I don't mean that any necessarily single person is, has a specifically evil intent. Simply saying that just because you can collect information doesn't mean that you should collect information, right? It's like all right. Here is one, a bold opposition to God. You shall be scattered, says God, but we will not, say they. Woe unto him that thus strives with his maker, fights against. 2, a bold competition with God. It is God's prerogative to be universal monarch, Lord of all, and King of kings, right? So when we talk about that universal monarchy, right, that universal monarchy is dangerous in the hands of a fallen, sinful man, right? It's glorious in the nature and character of the one true God. The man that aims at that universal monarchy, offers to step into the throne of God, who will not give his glory to another. Okay, so that is, God won't give his glory to anyone else. God won't say, "Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't realize you were here, and I recognize that you're the one that needs to step into this throne." God's not going to do that. In fact, God is very jealous of his monarchy, and he will. Yes, God is long suffering and all, but he will not strive against those who are trying to unseat him forever, right? He will destroy their tower. He will disperse them in the way that he sees best to do. All right, so we're getting into the one of the maybe most well-known stories of the Old Testament, I presume, the Tower of Babel, and it's really exciting history, and I hope you're seeing that when we're doing history right, we're finding that not only do we begin to see the connections from one event to another and such, and hopefully we can see God's hand guiding and directing. Certainly the Bible helps us with that. Matthew Henry helps us with that. But we're also seeing digestible lessons that we can draw from these events and that can be especially meaningful as we teach our children to do history right. And that's what this series is about, learning what it means when history is done right. Okay, and so we've been talking about the real event that follows the real event of the flood, and the real event, the real effort to establish, you could say, a one world government, a one world religion, a one world united in a particular geographic location. And ultimately, the issue with that is it is in defiance of God's command to mankind at that time to disperse. And it was done for the purpose of not having to be dispersed. And as we will see, as you probably know, I'm not giving anything away, the judgment of God is you will be dispersed. In other words, no matter how hard you try, God's plan for history will come forth. All right? So I hope that's meaningful to you and helpful for you. Please do the whole like, subscribe thing, and share this video with others. I think we're doing a good thing. I think we're learning important things and things that others would benefit from. And so getting others to view these videos would be great. One thing I didn't mention, you'll find it in the description below, information about Bradford Christian College, bradfordchristiancollege.com. Also, you can email me at tbarrett@covenantacademyonline.com. You'll see that in the description. If you want to talk to me about live online classes for your homeschooling situation, a homeschool co-op, a Christian school, church school, love to talk to you. It's something I've been doing for many years now, and I'd love the opportunity to help you fulfill, your educational plans and goals for your children, your students, in whatever setting. So tbarrett@covenantacademyonline.com. Hey, thanks for being a part. Thanks for following us and watching not only this series but the other streams that we do. All found at Bradford Christian College YouTube channel. Click on playlists and you'll see the different streams that we do. Love to have you watch those, share them, and please leave a comment, ask a question, and let's get a conversation going. So thanks for being a part. Have a good night.